The key felt cold and heavy in Andrea's hand, much like the dread that weighed down her heart with each step she took toward the front door. The world outside was draped in the soft hues of twilight, but she knew the storm that awaited her within was void of any such beauty. She took a deep breath, bracing herself for the inevitable confrontation, and turned the key. As the door creaked open, the tension in the air was almost tangible, a prelude to the storm that was about to break. Walter was there, pacing the living room, his figure looming in the dim light like an ominous shadow. His voice, when it finally came, was like a thunderclap in the silence of their small apartment. "Where the hell have you been?" Walter's tone was sharp, laced with an aggression that made Andrea flinch. "I was at work, Walter. We've been over this. Saturdays are busy, you know that," Andrea replied, her voice steady but her hands betraying her anxiety as they fumbled with the strap of her purse. "Work? Call that work?" he scoffed, his voice rising. "Bringing in peanuts, that's what you call work?" Andrea felt her patience fraying at the edges but fought to keep her voice calm. "It's all I can find right now, Walter. You know the situation." The situation Walter mimicked mockingly, taking a step closer, his presence oppressive. "The situation is you prancing around while I'm here, dealing with ... with everything." "Dealing with what, Walter? Sitting on the couch? We've talked about you trying to find a job, any job. We need to support each other." Not Andrea's voice trailed off, the futility of her words hanging heavy between them. Walter's eyes flashed with anger, and for a moment, Andrea thought she saw a flicker of the man she once knew, buried beneath layers of bitterness and resentment. "Support? You call this support? I'm the man of this house, Andrea? Or have you forgotten?" The air was thick with unsaid words and stifled dreams. Andrea remembered a time when their evenings were filled with laughter and plans for the future. Now, they danced a dangerous tango around each other's disappointments and failures. "I haven't forgotten," Andrea whispered, more to herself than to Walter. "But how can we move forward if we're both stuck in the past?" Walter turned away, his shoulders tense. "Just go do whatever it is you do. Leave me alone." As Andrea retreated to the sanctuary of their bedroom, the distance between them felt greater than ever. She sat on the edge of the bed, her mind racing. How had their love, once so vibrant and full of promise, dwindled to this? A shared space filled with silence and regret. Outside, the first stars of the evening began to twinkle, oblivious to the turmoil within the small apartment. Andrea looked out the window, her heart aching for a sign, any sign, that there was still hope for them, for her. The night wore on, a silent witness to the disquiet homecoming that had become their new normal. Andrea knew something had to change, but in the darkness of their shared life, she couldn't yet see the light. After the storm of Walter's accusations had settled into an uneasy silence, Andrea lay on their bed, staring at the ceiling. The darkness of the room seemed to envelop her, a fitting metaphor for the state of their marriage. Yet, in the quiet, her mind wandered back to brighter days, when laughter and love filled their home, a stark contrast to the desolation that surrounded her now. She remembered their first apartment together, small and cramped but brimming with hopes and dreams. It was a simple time when happiness was a shared pizza on a Friday night and dreams were plans sketched out on the back of a napkin. "Do you remember how we used to plan our future in this very room?" Andrea spoke softly, breaking the silence as Walter entered the bedroom, his steps heavy with defeat. Walter paused, the shadow of a man who once shared those dreams lingering in his gaze. "Yeah, I remember," he said, his voice a low rumble, tinged with a sorrow that maybe, just maybe, he felt the loss too. "We were so sure we could conquer the world together," Andrea continued, her voice laced with nostalgia. "You were going to start your own business, and I was going to write." Walter let out a scoff that held no real humour. "Look how that turned out," he muttered, sitting on the edge of the bed, a respectful distance away, yet miles apart in every way that mattered. Andrea turned to face him, propping herself up on one elbow. "We were happy, Walter. Wasn't that worth something? Can't we find our way back to that?" Walter looked away, the walls he had built around himself impenetrable. That was before reality hit. Before I.we lost everything. His voice was a mix of anger and something else Andrea couldn't quite place. Regret? Maybe. But those dreams, Walter, they were ours. And I believe we can dream new ones. Together, Andrea's voice was a whisper now, a plea for him to remember, to hope. Walter stood abruptly. The moment of vulnerability sealed away as quickly as it had appeared. Dreams don't pay the bills. Andrea, his words were a dismissal, an end to the conversation she wasn't ready to finish. Andrea watched him leave the room, a part of her wanting to scream, to reach out and shake him, to awaken the man she once knew from his self-imposed slumber. But she remained silent, her heart aching for the love they once shared, now buried under the weight of unspoken words and unfulfilled promises. Alone in the dark, Andrea allowed herself a moment to grieve for their lost dreams, for the laughter that had once echoed through their home. She clung to the memories of better days, a lifeline in the growing chasm between them. As sleep finally claimed her, Andrea's last thoughts were of a time when love was enough, a time before the echoes of their happier past became a haunting reminder of all they had lost. She drifted off, the resolve forming in her heart. Tomorrow she would start anew, fight harder, for herself, for Walter, for the vestiges of the life they once dreamed of together. The next morning, Andrea stepped out into the sunlight, her resolve from the night before mingling with a sense of unease. She decided to take a longer route to work, craving the clarity that often came with a walk through the bustling city streets. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts about Walter, their marriage, and the shards of dreams they left in their wake. As she walked, her eyes caught a familiar figure across the street. It was Lawrence, her childhood friend, whom she hadn't seen in years. He was slightly limping, a testament to the challenges he had faced, but his smile was as bright as she remembered. Without a second thought, she crossed the street, her heart beating with anticipation and a touch of nostalgia. "Lawrence," Andrea called out, her voice carrying over the morning din. Lawrence turned, and upon seeing Andrea, his face lit up with genuine surprise and delight. "Andrea, is that really you?" he exclaimed, his smile widening. They hugged, a warm, comfortable embrace that spoke of shared childhoods and memories long buried under the weight of adulthood. "I can't believe it's you." "How long has it been?" Andrea asked, stepping back but still holding onto his arms. "Too long," Lawrence replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You look ... well, you look great, despite looking like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders." Andrea laughed, a sound she realized she hadn't heard from herself in a while. "Life, you know, it's complicated. But enough about me. How have you been? I heard you became a lawyer." Lawrence nodded, a look of modest pride crossing his features. "Yeah, I did. It's been a journey, but I'm doing what I love. Helping people, making a difference where I can." Their conversation flowed easily, as if the years apart had been mere days. Lawrence shared stories of his legal battles, of the lives he had touched, and the hurdles he overcame, not just in his profession, but also personally. Andrea found herself drawn into the warmth of his presence, a stark contrast to the coldness she had grown accustomed to at home. "You always were the strong one, Lawrence, overcoming every obstacle life threw your way," Andrea said, admiration clear in her voice. Lawrence shook his head, his expression turning serious. "Strength isn't about facing life alone or pretending you're not hurt. It's about knowing when to ask for help, Andrea." The simplicity and truth of his words struck Andrea. Here was her friend, who had faced more challenges than most, reminding her of a lesson she had forgotten. "Andrea, if you ever need someone to talk to or anything at all, I'm here." "Okay." Lawrence's tone was earnest, his concern palpable. For a moment, Andrea considered pouring out her heart, telling Lawrence about the struggles with Walter, the loneliness, the desperation. But she hesitated, the words catching in her throat. "Thank you, Lawrence. That means a lot," she said instead, her smile tinged with sadness. As they parted ways, promises of keeping in touch exchanged, Andrea felt a warmth she hadn't in months. The unexpected reunion had offered her a glimpse of hope, a reminder that there were still people in her life who cared, who saw her for who she was. Walking away, Andrea glanced back, seeing Lawrence wave. In that moment, she realized that sometimes the universe offers us small lifelines, moments of connection that remind us we're not alone. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for her to start reaching out. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the city as Andrea made her way to the small cafe where she was meeting Lawrence for coffee. The weight of her conversation with Walter from the night before hung heavy on her heart. She needed a friend, now more than ever, and Lawrence, with his ever-present optimism despite his challenges, seemed like a beacon in her storm. As she spotted Lawrence at a corner table, his smile was like a warm embrace. "Andrea, it's been too long," he greeted, his voice bright and inviting. "Lawrence, thank you for meeting me," Andrea said, her smile genuine but tired as she took the seat across from him. They exchanged pleasantries, but Lawrence's keen eyes missed nothing. "You seem troubled, Andrea. What's going on?" Andrea hesitated, the floodgates of her worries and fears threatening to open. "It's Walter. Things have been difficult," she admitted, the understatement of the year. Lawrence's expression grew serious. "I've noticed the change in you. Tell me, friend, how can I help?" It all came pouring out, then Walter's unemployment, his resentment, the escalating arguments, and her growing sense of helplessness. Lawrence listened, his demeanor calm, his presence a comforting anchor. When she finished, Lawrence leaned forward, his resolve clear. "Andrea, no one should have to endure this. You know, I've seen a lot in my line of work. I can help you navigate through this." "Navigate through this?" "Lawrence, I don't even know where to begin. I'm just so tired," Andrea confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Lawrence reached across the table, offering a reassuring squeeze to her hand. "I mean it, Andrea. I can help you legally separate from Walter if that's what you want. I'm not just saying this as a friend, but as one of the best lawyers in the city. You have rights, and you deserve happiness." Andrea blinked back tears, overwhelmed by his kindness. "But Lawrence, I can't afford a lawyer, especially not someone of your caliber." "That's not what this is about. I want to help you because you're my friend and you're in need. We can worry about the details later. Right now, you need someone in your corner, and I'm offering," Lawrence insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument. The realization that she had a way out, a lifeline offered by an old friend, was both terrifying and liberating. I don't know what to say, Lawrence, except thank you. Say you'll think about it." "That's all I ask," Lawrence replied, his smile gentle. As they continued to talk, the path before Andrea began to clear, if only just a little. The road ahead was daunting, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. With Lawrence's help, perhaps she could find her way to a happier, healthier life. The days following her meeting with Lawrence were filled with a mix of apprehension and a newfound sense of empowerment. Andrea had spent so long under Walter's shadow that the idea of stepping out into the light, though daunting, was also exhilarating. Late one evening, after another tension-filled day avoiding Walter's disdainful silence, Andrea found herself at her old, cluttered desk. She was surrounded by the remnants of her once cherished writing projects. Lawrence's words echoed in her mind, a beacon calling her toward something better. She picked up her phone and dialed Lawrence, the decision weighing heavily on her heart but feeling undeniably right. "Hey, Andrea, how are you holding up?" Lawrence's voice was warm, a stark contrast to the coldness she'd grown accustomed to at home. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, Lawrence. About getting help," Andrea started, her voice shaky but determined. "That's great to hear, Andrea. Truly. What's on your mind?" "It's just all so overwhelming, but when you offered to help, for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. I think I'm ready to take that step, Lawrence. I want to be free of this." Andrea confessed, her words punctuated by a deep, liberating breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Lawrence's response was immediate and supportive. "I'm glad to hear you're ready, Andrea. This is about you reclaiming your life. You deserve happiness, peace, and respect. We'll take it one step at a time, okay? I'll be with you every step of the way." "How do we start? What do I need to do?" Andrea asked, her pen poised over a notepad, ready to reclaim some control over her life. "First things first, let's meet up and talk about your options and what this process looks like. It's important you understand every aspect and feel comfortable moving forward. How about we meet tomorrow at the cafe? We can lay everything out then. Okay, yes, let's do that. Thank you, Lawrence, for everything. I don't think I can ever repay you for this. There's nothing to repay, Andrea. Friends help each other. Remember, you're not alone in this. See you tomorrow. Hanging up the phone, Andrea felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with legal proceedings and difficult decisions, but for the first time she felt a flicker of hope. The night no longer seemed so oppressive and the shadows in her home less daunting. She glanced around at the life she'd built within these walls, a life once filled with love and now tainted by sorrow. But beneath the layers of pain and regret, she began to see the possibility of a new beginning. A beginning where she could write her own story, one where she was not a victim but a survivor. As she went to bed that night, Andrea felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The journey ahead would be challenging, but she was no longer navigating it in the dark. With Lawrence by her side and a newfound belief in herself, she drifted off to sleep, dreaming of the life that awaited her on the other side of this storm. A life where she could finally breathe free. The evening air was thick with tension as Andrea prepared dinner, the silence in the apartment oppressive, a stark contrast to the chaotic storm brewing within her. Walter had been more distant than usual, his brooding presence a constant reminder of the inevitable confrontation she dreaded yet knew was necessary. As she set the table, her hands trembled slightly, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She had resolved to confront Walter, to tell him of her plans to seek a legal separation with Lawrence's help. The thought of it made her stomach churn, but the glimmer of hope Lawrence had ignited in her heart bolstered her courage. Walter entered the kitchen, his expression dark, as if he could sense the shift in the air. He eyed the table, then Andrea, a suspicious glint in his eyes. "What's all this? Trying to butter me up for something?" he asked, his voice dripping with contempt. Andrea took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Walter, we need to talk. This can't go on. I can't go on like this," she began, her voice stronger than she felt. Walter's expression hardened. "What are you talking about? Planning to leave? You think you can do better?" "It's not about doing better, Walter. It's about being happy, about feeling safe and respected." I've decided to seek a legal separation," Andrea said, the words rushing out before fear could reclaim them. For a moment, Walter seemed taken aback, then his face contorted with rage. "A separation? You're abandoning me? After everything I've done for you?" Andrea stood her ground, though her heart raced. "It's not about abandoning you, Walter. It's about finding peace. For both of us, we're both miserable, and you know it." Walter stepped closer, his anger palpable. "You won't get away with this. You think Lawrence will save you?" That cripple, he spat out, his words laced with venom. Andrea recoiled, the insult stinging deep, not just for Lawrence's sake but for the man Walter had become. "Lawrence is more of a man than you'll ever be. He's helping me because he cares, because he respects me, something you've forgotten how to do." The slap came out of nowhere, Walter's hand striking Andrea's cheek with a force that sent her reeling. Pain exploded across her face, her cheek burning as she tasted blood. Tears blurred Andrea's vision, but her resolve hardened. This was the breaking point, the moment of no return. She wouldn't, endure this any longer. "I'm leaving, Walter. I won't let you hurt me anymore." Walter's sneer was the last thing she saw before she grabbed her purse and fled the apartment, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to get away, to find safety. Her phone felt heavy in her hand as she dialed Lawrence, her voice a whisper when he answered. "Lawrence, I need you. Please." "Where are you?" "I'm coming." Lawrence's voice was immediate, a steady calm in the chaos of her flight. Andrea didn't look back as she stepped into the cool night, the streets a blur as she walked away from the life she had known, towards the uncertain promise of freedom. The pain in her cheek was nothing compared to the liberation blooming in her chest, the fear of the unknown overshadowed by the relief of escape. Tonight marked the end of her silence, the beginning of her fight for a life worth living. With each step, Andrea moved further away from her past, the breaking point not just a moment of despair, but the first step toward her new beginning. Under the dim light of a street lamp, Andrea waited, the cold night air biting at her skin, a stark reminder of the leap into the unknown she had just taken. Her cheek throbbed, a painful testament to the decision that had propelled her out of her home, away from Walter, towards anything that resembled hope. Lawrence arrived in what seemed like moments, his car pulling up to the curb with a haste that spoke of his concern. He stepped out, his expression one of worry that shifted to anger as he caught sight of her face. "Andrea, what happened?" he asked, his voice tight with barely contained fury. "It doesn't matter now. I'm done, Lawrence. I left. I can't go back there," Andrea replied, her voice wavering between relief and fear. Without a word, Lawrence guided her into the passenger seat, his actions gentle yet filled with a resolve that comforted her. They drove in silence, the quiet not awkward but filled with an unspoken understanding. Lawrence was taking her to his place, a safe haven for the night, a temporary stop on her journey to freedom. Once inside, Lawrence sat Andrea down, his lawyer persona taking over as he began to outline the steps they needed to take. "First thing tomorrow, we're going to file for a restraining order against Walter. It's clear he's a threat to you," he started, his tone professional yet tinged with concern. Andrea nodded, the reality of her situation settling in. "What after that? How do I even begin to start over?" "We'll file for divorce," citing irreconcilable differences, "and given his behavior tonight, I'd say we have a strong case for a favorable outcome for you. We'll make sure you're protected legally throughout this process." Lawrence explained, his words a lifeline in the tumultuous sea of her thoughts. "But the apartment, our things, my life, it's all tied to him," Andrea said, the magnitude of her decision dawning on her. "Property and possessions can be sorted out in court. Your safety and happiness are what's paramount. We'll argue for an equitable division of assets. You're not leaving this marriage empty-handed," Lawrence assured her, his confidence bolstering her spirits. "And work? I can't just. I don't want to run away from everything," Andrea pondered out loud, her mind racing with the practicalities of her new reality. "You won't have to. We'll make arrangements for you to work from somewhere safe for now. We can use my office as a temporary measure. What's important is that you keep some normalcy, something that's yours and only yours," Lawrence suggested, his thoughtful planning providing a semblance of stability in the chaos. The conversation moved to logistics, to immediate next steps, to the practicalities of disentangling a life so intertwined with another's, but throughout it all, Andrea felt a sense of empowerment growing within her. The path to freedom was fraught with uncertainty and challenges, but for the first time in a long time, she felt in control of her destiny. As they wrapped up their discussion, Lawrence placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone in this, Andrea. I'm here, every step of the way." The kindness in his words brought tears to Andrea's eyes, tears not of sorrow but of gratitude. "Thank you, Lawrence, for everything." That night, as Andrea lay in a guest room that Lawrence had prepared for her, she realized the true meaning of freedom. It wasn't just the absence of Walter's tyranny but the presence of choice, of agency over her own life. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time Andrea felt ready to face it, to embrace whatever came next with courage and hope. The path to freedom was laid out before her, and she was taking her first steps. Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the room where Andrea had found sanctuary. She woke up feeling a mix of emotions, predominantly a sense of surrealness that her life had taken such a dramatic turn overnight. Yet, beneath the layers of apprehension, there was an unmistakable current of excitement for what lay ahead. Lawrence had already started the coffee when Andrea made her way to the kitchen, the aroma filling the space with a comforting familiarity. "Morning," he greeted, turning from the counter with 2 mugs in hand. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in a long time," Andrea admitted, accepting the mug with a grateful smile. "I guess there's something about making a decisive change that's incredibly freeing." "That's the spirit," Lawrence said, his smile encouraging. "Today's a big day." "Are you ready?" "As I'll ever be," Andrea replied, her determination firming. "What's the plan?" We'll head to the courthouse first to file for the restraining order. Then, we'll start the divorce proceedings. I've called in a favor from a colleague to expedite the process. I want you to feel safe and legally protected as soon as possible." Lawrence outlined the day with the precision of someone well-versed in navigating legal mazes. Andrea nodded, absorbing the information, and after that, Lawrence paused, setting his mug down. "You start rebuilding. Think about what you want your life to look like, Andrea. This is your chance to redefine everything on your terms." The thought was overwhelming yet exhilarating. Andrea had spent so long under Walter's shadow, his needs and whims dictating the course of her life, that the concept of having complete autonomy was both foreign and inviting. "I don't even know where to start," Andrea confessed. "It feels like I'm learning to live all over again." "Start small," Lawrence advised, his voice gentle. "Reconnect with the things you love, the things Walter made you give up. You mentioned writing, remember?" A smile broke through Andrea's contemplative frown. "Writing? I haven't even thought about my stories in years." "There you go," Lawrence said, his encouragement tangible. "Rediscover, Andrea. The rest will follow." The day passed in a blur of paperwork and legal formalities, each step forward a piece of Andrea's old life falling away, making room for the new. By the time they left the courthouse, Andrea felt lighter, as though she'd shed a skin that no longer fit her. As they sat in Lawrence's car, ready to head back, Andrea turned to him, her heart full of gratitude. "Lawrence, I thank you isn't enough for everything you've done for me." Lawrence shook his head, dismissing her thanks. "You don't owe me anything, Andrea. Seeing you take control of your life, that's all the thanks I need." Andrea smiled, looking out the window at the city bustling around them. It looked different to her now, filled with potential and promise. What now, she asked, more to herself than to Lawrence. Now Lawrence started, pulling out of the parking spot. "You start living. Whatever that looks like for you, know that you have a friend in me. Always." The drive back was filled with talk of the future, of possibilities, and for the first time in a long while Andrea felt excited about what was to come. She was free from Walter's grasp, standing on the precipice of a new life she had the power to shape. As they reached Lawrence's place, Andrea realized it wasn't just an end but a beginning. A new chapter in her life was waiting to be written, and this time she held the pen. That night, as Andrea lay in bed, she didn't see a woman broken by her past but a woman emboldened by her future. Tomorrow she would start anew, with the lessons of her past lighting the way. Her journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. And for the first time, Andrea was eager to see where it would take her. Months had passed since Andrea had embarked on her journey towards freedom, a period marked by both challenges and triumphs. She sat at a cafe, the hustle and bustle of the city around her a testament to the life that continued, relentless and vibrant. Across from her sat Lawrence, his presence a constant in her new life, a friend who had become family. "Andrea, you look different," Lawrence observed, his voice carrying a note of admiration. "You seem more you." Andrea smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "I feel different. It's like I've been asleep for years and I'm finally awake. I never realized how much of myself I'd lost, how much I'd let Walter define me. It's been incredible to watch you find yourself again. You're writing, you're laughing more. It's like the Andrea I always knew was there is finally free to live her life," Lawrence said, his pride in her evident. "It's been a journey," Andrea admitted, sipping her coffee. "There were moments I doubted everything, wondered if I was making a colossal mistake. But then, I'd remember the feeling of being trapped, of losing my voice, and I'd know I made the right decision." "You did more than just make a decision, Andrea. You took action. You fought for your happiness, your freedom. That's something to be incredibly proud of," Lawrence encouraged, his words bolstering her further. Andrea reflected on the changes in her life. She had moved into a small apartment that, while modest, was hers and hers alone. It was her sanctuary, filled with traces of her new beginnings, manuscripts of stories she had started to write again, photographs of her with new friends, and even a small garden that she tended to with care. "I've started volunteering at a shelter for women," Andrea shared, a new passion lighting up her face. I share my story, and I listen to theirs. It's not much, but if I can help even one person feel less alone, less trapped, then it's worth it. That's amazing, Andrea. You're not just rebuilding your life, you're helping others find the strength to rebuild theirs, Lawrence said, admiration clear in his voice. And I couldn't have done it without you, Lawrence. You were my rock when I felt like I was drowning. You helped me see that I deserved better, that I could be more, Andrea said, her gratitude deep and sincere. Lawrence reached across the table, covering her hand with his. I just helped you see the strength that was already there, Andrea. You're the one who did all the hard work. The cafe around them buzzed with the energy of the city, a backdrop to their quiet, profound exchange. Andrea looked around, her heart full. She had faced her fears, confronted her past, and emerged stronger. She had found her voice again, rediscovered her passion for writing, and was using her experiences to empower others. As they stood to leave, Andrea felt a sense of completeness, a peace she had never known. Her journey had been fraught with obstacles, but she had navigated each one with a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. Walking out into the sunlight, Andrea took a deep breath, the air tasting of possibilities. Her life was her own again, a canvas on which she could paint her dreams and desires. She had been reborn from the ashes of her past life, her spirit reawakened to the beauty and potential of the world around her. This wasn't just an end to her ordeal, but the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, strength, and an unbreakable will to live life on her own terms. Andrea had not just survived, she had thrived, and in doing so she had become a beacon of hope for others walking a similar path. As she walked alongside Lawrence, Andrea knew that whatever the future held, she was ready. She had reclaimed her life, her identity, and her happiness. This was her reawakening, and she embraced it with her whole heart. Let us know in the comments how this story has inspired you, or share your own experiences of overcoming adversity. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories like this one. Hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest uploads. Your journey through the complexities of the human heart starts now. Remember, your story isn't over yet. It's just a new chapter beginning. Stay strong, stay inspired.